Yeah, I think that my dad and my relationship, it's so special on so many levels. I mean, how many people can say, first of all, that they ski with their parents or are coached by their parents, but then also to compete against him and have him be a coach on the team when he's not competing, and to stand on podiums together. It's something that I'll never really be able to fully put into words how special that is to me.
Hello, and welcome back or welcome to the Water Ski Podcast. This is Matteo Luzzeri, your host, and the goal of this podcast is to promote water skiing, my favorite sport and the favorite sport of a lot of you listening to this podcast. Episode 81, here we are, and it's the first part of my interview with Dorien Llewellyn. Dorien Llewellyn is the current trick world champion and one of those guys that has been setting records, world records in overall, which really, as we had a chance to hear with Joel, basically are the pinnacle of tournament water skiing, the highest level you can reach. I recorded this interview with Dorien in December, and it was a long interview, so I decided to keep it a little short in the first part. We really cover his junior years until college. And this is not to take anything away from the people that I've interviewed so far, but I think that especially with him, we needed to take it a little easy and unpack those years properly just because of, his family. The fact that he was a multi-sport athlete until college and was pursuing two sports, namely skiing and hockey, at a very high level. And all those experiences shaped him into the competitive, professional, unbelievable water skier that he is now. And I just wanted to take this week to sit with his teenage years and get the audience to think about it for a few days before we jump into what is going to be part 2 and most likely a part 3 also. Dorien, very interesting person to interview. Very eloquent, extremely self-aware, and this will not surprise those who know him on a personal level, but it was very good to just stay with him, stay with his thoughts, and sort of bring in my own 2 cents every now and then. I hope you enjoyed this interview. Before we jump into the interview, I have a couple of announcements. The first one is that I've created a new tab on my website called Links, very simply, and I've put all the water ski podcasts that I listen to and that I enjoy and that I know of. So one, check them out. Lot of good podcast content, water ski podcast content out there right now. And 2, if you know of some that I've forgotten or missed, well, let me know and I'll add them very happily. The second one is not really an announcement per se, but more of a thank you to everyone who has been listening, everyone who has been donating and deciding to support the podcast through advertisement. I have this goal that I've announced to get to episode 100, which will be my first video podcast. Hopefully, if timing and scheduling works well, it should be out right in the middle of July, roughly. So all of this has been very encouraging and very motivating to continue pursue this passion and that I have about podcasting. And then the third thing I wanted to say is that one of those adverts is here, has been here for me. I really appreciate their support. And this is the Flowpoint method, which, as many of you know, is that online water ski training program developed by Jenny Labaugh and Marcus Brown. And when I say that they leverage on years of experience, it really is true. I mean, these are 2 extremely competent professionals who decided to spend hours and hours to put together a very comprehensive training program, like technique, water ski technique, fitness, nutrition, mindset. Like, you really have a complete package to improve your water skiing. And I would say even beyond water skiing, like some of your general health and wellness. One of the things I really love, particularly for the period that we're in right now in the Northern Hemisphere, or at least in Northern Italy, where I see a lot of fog out of my window, is gym. And they really have good videos, properly explained exercises, showing proper execution. Obviously, Jenny, seeing her execution is something that gives you a good understanding of what you should strive for. So very, very, very helpful. And the other thing is, you are amateur, you're pro, doesn't matter. Like, this flow point method system can really help you and bring your skiing to the next level. So if you're interested, there's free trial that you can check out by going to the waterskipodcast.com/flowpoint method, one word, or you can click on the link in the show notes. You'll be, started with a free trial, and then you can decide if you want to continue and become a subscribed member. So go and check it out, the waterskipodcast.com/flowpoint method. Well, that's it. I just want to apologize for the delay with this, the release of this episode. We opened up the entries for the San Gervasio Pro Am 2 days ago, and the usual glitches and problems, but we basically have already closed entries for amateurs, which is exciting after less than 2 days. But obviously there's a waiting list, and then pros are also able to register as well. There were a few issues, so the last 48 hours have been a little crazy, and I didn't have time to publish. But here it is, first part of my interview with Dorien Llewellyn. Dorien, welcome to the Waterski Podcast, my friend. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks. I feel like it's been a long time coming. We've been talking about it for a while, so I'm excited to see where this goes.
Yeah, well, what a pleasure to have you. I know we've been talking about this for a long time, and I think I said it to someone else. Sometimes it's easier to do Zoom like we're doing now, just set a time and meet, than being in Florida and trying to meet up and then it never works. So, no, I'm glad we got to do it.
For sure. Yeah, I think, just in general in the ski community, every community almost, it seems like we're so close, and we have so many different things going on in our lives, and then you're like, oh yeah, let's do this. And you keep talking about it, and it's just kind of a foregone conclusion that because we're so close together that eventually it would happen. And I guess that's, right. You get to this point and you just set a date and you do it.
Exactly. The advantages of tech. Look, you are talking to me from Florida, and I think I want to venture in saying that's the setting probably where my first question will be answered. And my question is always the same. I'm very predictable. Dorien, how'd you get into water skiing?
I think most people would kind of guess what the easy answer to this question is. Obviously, my family was the biggest part of why I even was into skiing, grew up in skiing, and knew what skiing was. So yeah, the easy answer is my dad, my mom, and my grandparents, and my uncle, and everybody just, as soon as I was able, wanted to see me on skis and wanted me to at least share a little bit in this whole family adventure / legacy that we have. But then if I want to get more technical, I didn't really love skiing when I was younger. I played a lot of sports, and my parents, they never pushed me towards any sport. Actually, that's not exactly true. My mom really wanted me to be a golfer, but ironically, that was the one sport that I didn't want anything to do with. Which is funny too, because I love golf now, just a side note. But yeah, so I didn't really love skiing. It wasn't something that I wanted to do every day. And if, grandma and grandpa came down, I would ski for them because I knew it'd make them happy. And this is from when I was probably 3 till 9, 10 years old. But I just wanted to do other things. Maybe that was partly just because I was a kid and wanted to do something different than what my parents were doing. And around, and I was playing hockey a lot. My dad introduced me to hockey when I was young, and at 6 I started playing on teams, and that progressed pretty quickly, and I got pretty good at it, I'd like to say.
Yep.
And yeah, so I was doing that. I was playing soccer. I played a little basketball on the street with friends, but I must say, every time I go to Austria, and this is why Austria holds such a special place in my heart, especially when it comes to skiing. Every time I was there, I would be with all the kids there, and that was completely different than what I had here. Here was, parents were still training for the pro events and the tour, and then in Austria it was, summer camp, hang out with everybody basically, and I love that. That was my favorite part about skiing. And then when Sebastian, Tanguy Bennett's son, he's my cousin, which not a lot of people know that, and he started skiing, and he fell in love with it right away. And when we were 9 or 10, I think, he went out and tricked, and he beat my personal best, which I always laugh because I'm fairly certain that, you could do the math on the tricks, but I think it was just like 320 points or something. And
right.
That's what he skied. Mine was less. So I was like 260 or, whatever the math is on side slide reverse back front. It might only be 200 points. I don't even know. And so, yeah, when he did that, I got the competitive bug, and I wanted to do it with him, and I wanted to compete against him. And it was just something that, naturally just came about because of my competitive drive. And then, yeah, the rest is history after that. So I always, at this point, a lot of people might know that story because I always give credit to him and to the rest of my family, obviously, as well, for getting me into skiing. But I think that because my parents never pushed me to ski, that's why it ultimately became a pretty simple decision when, especially after high school, when I had to pick if I wanted to play college hockey or ski as my job or try to, ski professionally. I think that's why it was easier to come back to it because it was my decision.
Yeah. Well, I love so far we just got started, and there's so many dualities, right, in your story. So pleasure versus comp, Austria versus US. So I guess, I pride myself of the fact that a lot of the listeners of the Water Ski Podcast do not compete, might have never seen a slalom course. So give them a sense of why, like you said, your parents were skiing in the Pro Tour, but just give a sense of who your parents were and where they were skiing, what type of tournaments they were doing, just to give a sense of your upbringing.
Yeah, so I was born into water ski royalty. That's the basic term of it, I would say. When I'm in Canada, the best way to describe it is my dad, in my opinion, is the Wayne Gretzky of water skiing. No, I have respect for a lot of guys in this sport, and but at the same time, when I look at my dad and what he's accomplished, and he just won the athlete of the quarter century, so it's not super out of the blue to say this. Like, he is the greatest 3-event skier of all time. He's a 9-time world champion, 11-time world record holder. And the stat that I don't know if anybody will ever touch is the 117 pro wins. Like, the not just podiums, but yeah, first place. And that
wins.
Incredible. And when you really see the size of that accomplishment is when you talk to guys like Nate or Regina, or I don't even know, like Ryan Dodd, Freddie, and obviously those guys are not Regina, but the rest of the guys, they're single eventers. So that does come into play. But, when you talk to them, I think Nate a couple of years ago was at 30 wins. And if you think back, right, I mean, for 5 years or more, Nate's won every tournament. Yeah. And then, like I just said, they are single eventers, but at the same time, that definitely doesn't change the fact that my dad won 117 because, he obviously had to be good enough to win in trick, jump, and overall. So,
right.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that there's no slalom titles in there. I don't want to shortchange them, but literally shortchange.
Right.
But yeah, no. So that's my dad's side, and obviously my mom, 2-time world champ, and multiple time podiums at the Worlds. I think she won 20 or more European titles. And my mom's story is amazing too.
Crazy.
I actually wrote about this for a college application back when I first was applying. Um, and my mom was a gymnastics national champion at the age of 6 in Austria. And she told my grandmother that one day she'd be a world champ. She just didn't know what sport yet. And at 6,
Okay.
yeah, at 6, she already had the mental fortitude to realize I'm not gonna, or it might actually, sorry, it might have been 9. 6 would be really young to figure this out. So at 9, she was national champ, and then she realized I'm not going to be better than national champ. Like I don't think that I can make it on an international scale. And so she stopped and she started rowing, and she became Austrian national rowing champ at the age of 16. And then again, she realized, I don't know if I can keep doing this. I mean, rowing is a really tough sport. And also she didn't know if she could, again, be as good as she wanted to be on an international scale. And so she was rowing on our hometown in Gmunden, Austria, and saw skiers, and probably Franz Oberleitner and a couple of the guys at the local club were skiing, and she tried it out, and they were blown away. They said, man, this girl, she has natural talent. And they started bringing her out to the lake in Fischelham, and that's where I grew up skiing. And then, yeah, she moved to Swiss at the age of 18, so only like 1 or 2 years after she just started skiing. She worked for ski sets. She had no money. She didn't really speak all that much English. And then 5 years later, which is absolutely mind-blowing, 5 years later, she went back to Europe and she won the Europeans. And then the rest is history after that. So yeah, my parents, in terms of skiing, are as you know, as high as you can get in terms of accomplishments and stuff.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
In terms of accomplishments, talent, determination, which, you know, knowing your mom personally, she always comes up and is a big example to me of someone who's particularly motivated and determined. When she has a goal, she goes for it. So yeah, that's the context. And yet you said they never pushed you into skiing, right? But I assume, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, just the fact of skiing, because obviously you were skiing with dad, with mom, what kind of role that played? Because you must have known who they were on a skiing level, and there you were doing, you know, as you said at first, like anybody else, side slide reverse, back front reverse. Like you had to start from zero as well.
Yeah, no, I obviously I grew up watching them compete at the Masters and at different pro events, and some of my earliest memories are watching them compete and win. I remember one year where I was standing on the dock at the Masters back when they had that floating dock, which we should bring back because that was pretty cool. And I remember, you know, Freddie and my dad were top 2, which has happened so many times, and they've gone back and forth so much. So, you know, I'm bringing up one that my dad won. Just obviously I'm biased. But
course.
You know, my dad beat Freddie by a foot, and I remember them both skiing up onto the patch of, you know, that turf or whatever it was, or the carpet, and Freddie grabbed my dad and pulled him back into the water, and, you know, they were just having fun and being, you know, they were good friends, and I jumped into the water. I asked my mom, you know, can I jump in if my dad wins? And I remember the announcer saying, you know, oh, Darrett's son Dorian's going nuts, and, you know, that's one of my first memories. I think I was 5 or 6 years old, and, you know, I actually nowadays when I like Moomba or something, if let's say Pato won one year and I tackled him into the water, so like that, it's funny how that memory kind of stuck with me, and it's something that I kind of have fun with guys now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that sort of playfulness that still has to be in place.
Yeah.
Was that present when about your own skiing? Like, were you able to keep it playful and fun despite the type of royalty you were skiing with?
It's tough. Well, you know, I try. I'm trying to get better at it. Actually, it's something that I've really worked on the last, you know, couple years, especially. The more that I've made this into what I am doing for a living. Obviously, I'm still going to school, but from the time that I came back from Boston when I played hockey up there for high school, it's, you know, and taking it more seriously and doing it all year, because when I was at school in Boston, I was trying to play, you know, college hockey and then hopefully one day professional hockey while also still skiing. But I knew that I only had 5 or 6 months a year, kind of like all the European guys. So I was pretty uptight for a while, and then I came back and I carried that same intensity, and And I'm sure we'll get into this even more in a second, but yeah, obviously skiing with my parents, it brings about its own intensities. My dad and my relationship, especially obviously with my mom as well, she's always been there, probably my biggest rock, my biggest supporter, other than probably Sebastian and my dad as well. But yeah, she's always been that buffer for the two of us if we get too intense. And but yeah, I think that my dad and my relationship, it's so special on so many levels. I mean, how many people can say, first of all, that they ski with their parents or are coached by their parents, but then also to compete against him and have him be a coach on the team when he's not competing, and to stand on podiums together. It's something that I'll never really be able to fully put into words how special that is to me. Yeah, and to actually, it's really interesting. And I have to remind myself of this all the time. I might get some of the details on this wrong. I haven't read the book, but I think there's a book about the 5 love languages, and how there's material love language, which by the way, all of these are obviously, everybody has their own. So there's no judgment on any of these, but people that show love and can accept when other people give them gifts, and that's how they fully appreciate love. And then people that take their time out of their day to do things for other people. And then that's kind of, my dad and I have never really been good at giving each other Christmas gifts. We have this mutual understanding that we give each other gifts that we really want ourselves. And in the process, we both end up using the thing anyway.
Okay.
So yeah. And I know that he's just not that kind of guy. Even with flowers for my mom, he just doesn't fully see the value in that all the time. Just something that's temporary. But then on the other hand, that's why that book, when I was told about it, it made so much sense to me, because no matter what I do, to a degree, obviously there are limits. I have to keep myself in check as well. But almost 99% of the time, even if I'm being difficult or whatever, he'll be in the boat the next day, the next set, and it's not that I'm immediately forgiven, but it's something that that's how he expresses, I think, how much our family and I mean to him, is by taking all that time and being there for me every day. And I was definitely really emotional at the Worlds. And I just, at the end, I had Tony. I knew Tony was about to send it off to the next portion of the podcast, or the webcast. And I had to stop him for a second, just say that to everybody, because that moment was a culmination of so many things that my parents have done for me, and so many times that I've been difficult at times. And there's a lot of people that can also attest to that. Like Janina's been here, and she's seen some of the more intense times, and she's been that buffer as well. But at the same time, my dad puts in hours and hours and hours just traveling and coaching and being there, and even being a sports psych. It's funny, he never really did sports psychology when he was growing up. And I love the fact that we're now open enough to where I can say I've had a sports psych for a long time, probably since I was 16. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy how many things that he figured out by himself. So the list of the things that my dad and my mom are to me is pretty much endless. Like there's so many different facets and things that I rely on.
Yeah, I mean, it's such the second that you have a parent coach is already, the dynamic of the relationship becomes complex.
Yeah.
Now you have a parent coach legend. Yeah. I can only imagine, like how much more complex it becomes. So give me a sense. You said at the beginning, and I want to get to the hockey soon, but in the beginning it was a lot of like home, let's say fairly structured training. I'm assuming, you're already living where you are now with a lake and a course in front of your house. But then also the summer camp, sort of like more European club skiing type of feel, which is generally more kids, one lake, scrambling for time to ski, constant comparison.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Pretty much. What is your recollection of those days? Like, what did you take from one place? What did you take from the other?
Yeah, honestly, that actually, I would say it's still the same combo of two different styles that I'm using today. Just between this year going to Jax and being here, and and I mean, I was 6, 7, 8 years old when I wasn't really loving skiing. So, as a kid, you just want to do a bunch of different things. So it's not at all the fault of me being here and it being regimented, but yeah, it was regimented, and I was mainly the only skier here. That was, before, when I was 12 and 13 and 14 and more kids started coming over. I remember one Easter, I think I was 12 or 13 years old, and we had 14 kids here. And so,
Okay.
I constantly get kicked out of my room. Like we have 2 guest rooms, and then my room is basically another guest room if we need it. And
Of course.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, when I grew up, I loved sleeping on the couch. I don't know why. I thought it was the coolest thing. But yeah, that Easter we had 14 kids, and Sebastian Alexander, who was Sebastian's brother, who also was a great skier in his own right. He broke the U14 slalom record in Austria that had been held by Mikey Wienerreiter for, I think, 20, 25 years. And we all were sleeping in the living room. So, I had that later, but at the beginning, it definitely was just me, my parents, and they were obviously super focused on, their own pro skiing, and yeah, it felt like training. And then in Europe, it was walk from my house down to Franz Oberleitner's house, jump in the car, 6 of us in the car, drive over to Fischelheim. Ended up being 12 or more kids running around the lake, and we got to go to the supermarket there and buy our own food, which, man, I mean, I love food, and I was a bit chubby when I was a kid. I mean, right, it's off season right now. I'm kind of chubby right now, but I thought it was the coolest thing. You get to buy your own food. You got to basically kind of pretend like, we were little adults, and then we go back to the lake and just go jump in the water and ski and everything. So,
And that's a classic Austrian water ski tradition. Like, you ski in the morning, and then you go to the supermarket and you fix your food, no matter if you're 8 or 73. Like, that's how it works.
Yeah, exactly. And it was just, I mean, and yeah, obviously, we weren't master chefs. At least most of us weren't. So we're out there, we're buying just like sliced bread and some cheese and some ham, and we throw it in the little toaster oven. And we thought we were the Jamie Olivers of the world, Gordon Ramsays,
Right.
which I guess Europeans don't look at Gordon Ramsay the way we do here in the U.S., but here in the U.S. he's considered, top notch.
Right.
But yeah, so that in of itself, just hanging out with all the kids, that was so fun for me. And like I said, that's the way I went about this year. And I started the year, probably the first 3-4 months until April, skied here every single day. It was mostly just my dad and myself and my mother. And yeah, after a while, I kind of started to, get tired, and we can go into this later, but I actually went through burnout earlier. I know you just did a podcast on this recently. And that was pretty heavy. So then after, when I got back, I took a little short break, went to Europe, knowing that, that was kind of the best place for me to kind of rest and recharge, and came back a couple weeks later, got back on track, and then, went up to Jax, and that was when, it kind of, everything opened up a little bit more for me in terms of having fun this year again. And like we said earlier, just enjoying skiing instead of getting so intense about the details all the time.
Right.
Which is
so easy to do in a sport like ours.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like, the details are, like, I think the challenge is always like trying not to get overblown by the details, and just pick the 2 or 3 main ones and stay with those.
Yeah.
And I definitely want to get into that. One of the things I noticed, and let's see if I'm on the right track. So, there seems to be this constant, okay, I'm training, it's an individual sport, and then I enjoy when I'm in groups, right? Whether it's in Austria or at Jax lately.
Yeah.
Do you think it has something to do with hockey, like, meaning that sort of like wanting to be part of a team rather than being an individual athlete?
Yeah, I think for sure. As you were just starting to say that, the first thing that popped in my mind is that it's probably because of hockey. I haven't fully talked about this with other people that haven't played team sports. It'd actually be really interesting to have that conversation now. Um, but yeah, definitely. That's the thing I would say that I probably miss the most about hockey. I mean, obviously the speed and the fluidity of the game. I actually played this morning.
Oh, nice.
It's so fun, and I skiing is the sport that I love to do more than any sport. But I would say that hockey is, in my opinion, the greatest sport on the planet. And I might get some feedback on that. We can put up a poll or something. Do you agree or disagree with me?
I agree, and this comes from someone who doesn't know how to skate for crap, but as a well, obviously a sport professional, but also curiosity. Like I believe is the best sport of all of them. Yeah. And I have my own idea of why, but I'm curious to hear yours, obviously, because you play.
Yeah, I mean, for me, just having played it and the speed of the game and the like all the soccer and lacrosse and basketball and even American football, they have different, like, there's different dynamics in each game. Obviously, each set, each play, like nothing's ever exactly the same. But hockey just is so fast in that regard. So you always have to be thinking. You always have to have your head up. And I love that. And I love seeing the ice, having the puck, and just scanning the ice and seeing. And I'm super analytical, and that probably also comes from skiing and also from school. I was always a science and math kid when I was in school. So yeah, I just, that aspect of the game is so interesting to me. And, I go watch all the time now. I went to a professional game last week, and I went up to see one of my best friends, like kind of like a little brother growing up, Jake Wise, and he's playing up at Ohio State, and he actually got drafted to the Blackhawks a couple years back. So yeah, he watched those guys play even at the collegiate level, and just some of the things that they do in the moment, you sit there and you're like, man, like I still think I could do it, but some of the things that these kids are doing it's incredible. So yeah, I love the game, and to go back to what we were saying before, having the team aspect and the one thing that I think skiing really misses, and is not, I don't know if there's a way to really fix this. Jump is probably the closest that comes to what I'm about to say. And it's the build up to the game, just walking into the game and knowing that, for a lack of a better term, going to war with the guys next to you. And it's going to be physical. Guys are going to get hit. Like, there's always a chance that you can get hurt in all sports. And you just know that you can depend on the guy next to you. And that whole build up and the excitement of the game, and that, I miss that, because I personally am working on this a lot. When it comes to slalom and trick especially, you get one chance, and if you fall, that's it. And so there's a lot of times where I feel like as skiers, all of us, we go into tournaments and you're holding your breath through the like most of it. And it was something that I worked on so much before this Worlds, and I was so proud, of the work that we put in as a team with my sports psych and everybody, that I actually was able to, when I jumped in the water at the Worlds this year for slalom, being the first event, and also knowing, obviously slalom is, I'm working on it, but I would say it's my weakest event. And it's the event where, if I had run a half at 39 or run 39, it's something that I wasn't sure exactly how I was going to come out of slalom. But when I jumped in the water, I actually felt like this, oh, cool, like finally I get to go out and just do this. Like, I've been waiting for this moment, instead of holding my breath and just saying, I got to get through this. And that's definitely something I've worked on a lot with my sports psych over the years. But yeah, like just
creating good anticipation rather than like dreading the moment.
Yeah. And yeah, to go a little bit more technical on that, I started working with a different sports psychologist the last 3 years. And he started to realize when I would talk about slalom, I would always, mention my height or mention something as like a little bit of a buffer, but then also that I was looking at slalom as more of, I just have to get a good overall score. And if you look at my scores before probably the last 2 years, so, in the time period that I started working with this sports psych, there was a lot of 3 at 39s, like so many 3 at 39s. And up until now, in the last 2 years, with Joel, myself, Adam, and Coleman, and Danilo, and now Louis. You know, before that, 3 at 39 was a great overall score. And it's still a decent overall score, but you need more now. And so there were so many years where I just ran 3, 3, 3, and I'd run 38, and I would feel so nice and easy going through 38, and then I'd get slack at 1, turn 2, get to 3. And I would just leave tournaments, and I would think, man, like this just, it's not fun right now because I do all this work. I run, you know, at the time, probably run 4 passes or 3 passes because I would start at 28, sometimes 32, but I would do all this work and then I would end up just running the same score. And I finally got to the point where I got back to, you know, loving slalom again because I was pushing myself to try to run 39 every tournament or try to, you know, whatever the conditions were, just ski as well as I could ski instead of worrying about the overall score. And another thing that, you know, my sports psych helped me realize was part of that is because slalom was my first love with skiing, because that was when I was younger and I was 12 and 13, 14, I was actually kind of tall, which is shocking. I was about, by the time I was 14, I don't think I've grown since then. But, you know, I developed really quickly in terms of slalom. I ran, you know, was running into 38s when I was 12. And I mean, I don't know about the scores nowadays. They might be better, but I won the Europeans in slalom first. And then, you know, was running a 2 at 39. I think, 2 at 39 when I was 14, and at the time that was an unofficial world record. And so, you know, that it's an interesting perspective on the fact that I started as a slalom skier first, and then all of a sudden, you know, started to become more of a jumper by the end of my years in juniors. When I won the junior masters and jumped twice, and obviously I was getting good at overall at that point. And then been interesting. Then I got hurt, blew out my knee and missed the whole year. And then jump obviously took a step back because I was trying to get my confidence back from the injury. And then I became a tricker for a while. You know, I just kind of started to progress really, really well in tricks. And I do credit Pato a lot with that, because Pato and I are and were really good friends, even when he was, you know, 12, 13, 14. And we would go ski together, and I'd watch how much that he would jump on the trampoline and watch videos, and it pushed me to try to be better, because I didn't want this 14-year-old kid. I'm 18 and I can't let him beat me. Like, come on.
Of course.
Which, you know, nowadays it's not really that big a deal anymore when you say, oh yeah, Pato beat me. I mean, obviously I still don't want to get beaten, but you know, now everybody's not beating him. So, you know, but back then I was like, this guy's 14. Like, come on, you got to be better than this.
Well, I mean, 2 months ago you did beat him, but I think we're jumping a little too far.
Yeah.
Look, so, you know, here you are, juniors, you start as a slalomer, first love, first course, then jump, you know, probably also thanks to family tradition, kind of comes up.
Kind of helps.
And in the midst of all of this, there's hockey, and you said you moved to Boston for high school.
Yeah.
Now, where was the decision? What was the motivation? Like, were you still a bit of wearing both shoes, you know, like sort of binding and skates? And what brought you there? And how was that experience?
Well, yeah, first, I mean, you know, looking back on it now, obviously, I'm not playing professional hockey, but I don't regret that decision at all. I mean, could I be better than I am right now in terms of skiing? For sure. I took 4 years of less skiing and focusing, like you said, having my foot in both camps, and probably doing both at 70, 80% rather than one at 100%. And I do think about that from both perspectives, actually, of, you know, if I'd only played hockey, could I have been better? And I would take the summers off because I'd go to Europe and ski. And at the same time, if I just skied, would I have been better? But, you know, first of all, when I left for Boston, I was 14, just turning 15. So I was really young, and I went to boarding school. So I was by myself. And that experience as a whole, I have lifelong friends that, you know, I don't get to see as much as I want to, which is, you know, probably a lot my fault. If you ask anybody, and I literally mean anybody, they will tell you, actually, you probably can even answer this too, because I did it to you. I'm the worst texter on the planet. The worst. And
I know worse ones. Don't worry.
Okay.
I have colleagues and friends, and no, you're average low, but you're not the worst.
But so I have lifelong friends from there, and I have so many experiences from playing hockey at that school. I got to play at Fenway Park outside against our rival school, and I scored the first goal of the game, and we lost 2-1 in the last 5 minutes of the game. They scored 2 goals, but there was a moment in the third period where I looked up and I just saw the stars. I'm playing hockey against our rival team. We're winning 1-0. I scored. They said my name on the jumbotron. The whole school's there. Like, that's a memory that not many people have in general, and then for me to have it in a sport that I loved, and then to still be doing a different sport professionally, I mean, that's such a cool thing to be able to say. But yeah, I mean, just going away to a boarding school in general, like it gave me a sense of responsibility, and the school was really good too. Like a lot of the kids, I would say 50, 60, 70% of the kids in my class ended up at Ivy League schools. And that was a perfect setting for me as somebody that was a competitive person. So I excelled in terms of, studying hard and having all these really, really smart kids around me. And, I think they all lifted me up to just do the best that I could in school. So in terms of, school, it was great. In terms of growing up as a kid, it was great. Also appreciating the fact that, my parents are pretty cool. I don't feel embarrassed to say that. I didn't get, or I had 4 years of college experience before I even went to college. So a lot of kids realize in college how much they actually enjoy spending time with their parents. And I got that early. Yeah. And then, like I just said, the hockey thing, it didn't work out in the end. That I made it professionally. And had I been given the choice of both, I don't know which one I would have chosen. Obviously, I've seen, the grass is always greener kind of thing. And I watch hockey now and I'm like, oh, I wish that I could do that. It's so cool. And
right.
And even watching Jake play this last weekend, it was against Michigan. So obviously Ohio State, Michigan, huge rivalry, and people were going nuts in the stands. And it made me emotional. Like, first of all, I was so proud watching him. So happy that he's playing well, and I'm really excited to hopefully see him play in the NHL soon. But yeah, it's definitely an experience like no other, going to a school like that and learning not only, a bunch of different things by being away from home, but learning a lot about yourself and how I functioned as a person on my own and being responsible.
Yeah. So very formative experience as a young adolescent who goes away from home alone, chasing a dream, right? The fact that it was hockey rather than the water skiing in that regard is insignificant.
Yeah.
But one specific I'm interested in, because my understanding is this was a very, you went there for hockey. So the hockey level was high, the expectations from the coaches, the system were high.
Yeah.
Did you learn anything there, whether it is preparation for competition, training regimens, anything that you learned in those 4 years that you possibly transferred to your skiing when you made the decision?
First of all, the cliche thing to say is you never know a good thing till it's gone. And my first year, I played American football. We had to play 3 sports. And one of them, you could eventually go to the gym and do that as your sport. So for hockey players, we did that in the fall. But my freshman year, I played football and then played hockey. And then actually they let me ski in the spring. And eventually I'd play lacrosse in the spring. So I would do the fall, I would do skiing, then hockey, and then lacrosse. But for the first year, it's not that I didn't miss skiing at all, but it was just cool being able to do something different. And, like we've already said, hockey is one of the sports that I love the most. And I was really invested in that and trying to make the most of that opportunity. But then by the middle of my sophomore year, I kind of had a little bit of a rough time that year for hockey. The start of the year didn't go well. Actually, the end of the year went really well for me. But right around the middle, I realized how badly I wanted to be skiing again and how much I missed it. Mm-hmm. So it really opened my eyes again to see how much I loved skiing. And so that for me was the biggest takeaway. It was just realizing the passion that I had for skiing, and that I actually did want to go back and ski after high school, not because hockey wasn't going to go as easily or wasn't going to work out, but actually because it was something that I wanted to do. And then also, yeah, just the preparation of having to utilize your time in the best way possible. That was huge. In about March, or, end of March, early April, I'd start trying to train for the junior masters. And, at the time I was skiing with a guy that he actually is cool. The guy whose family I skied with, his dad just moved to South Carolina, and he just 2 weeks ago became a member of the Trophy Lake Ski Club. So like,
no way.
Crazy small world. Yeah. One of the people that worked there, she texted me and she was like, man, it's a crazy world. This guy said that he's friends with you. And I was like, yeah, you don't even know half the story. Like his son was literally my senior advisor at school. So that's cool. Like
wow.
that's one of the awesome things about skiing is this small community, and everybody knows each other, and we all have like this little interconnected web. But, yeah, just the efficiency of having to use my time, because I was skiing, and that family that I was skiing with, they literally had a rock, they called it the rock boat, because at the beginning of the year, the water was so cold and the water was low, and every now and then you'd hit a rock or something. So it was a mess. I mean, it was an old boat, and the spray from the boat was literally going over my head, and it was freezing. I was wearing a dry suit. So it definitely made me appreciate how awesome Florida is. I will say that I will never, ever complain about how hot it is. I mean, obviously within good reason. There are times where it's 110 or whatever, and everybody's like, oh, it's so hot. But I will never, ever complain that it's too hot because of what I had to ski in when I was up there. But yeah, so I think a good mix of, using your time efficiently and also just finding that passion, having just another reminder of how much it meant to me.
Yeah, which obviously, time efficiency in a sport like ours, where, many guests have said it with, like in previous episodes, you just can't do so many reps in water skiing. Like there's just no way that the limit of more reps are just going to be detrimental is so low that you have to know how to use your time on the water effectively and in a very efficient manner.
For sure.
No, that's a super cool thing. Like, one last question about that. So there was a time, as you sort of alluded to, where eventually you realized, in your own words, that the hockey thing wasn't going to work out. Yeah. Right? Now, that reminds me of a couple of situations that your mom had like that, which they sprouted from success, but also a very keen awareness of, this is maybe not as far as it will go, but it won't go further than that. Yeah. Do you notice a similarity? Were you sort of like having the same awareness, and what brought that awareness? Yeah.
I think that sophomore year, the one that I referred to as being tough, like at the beginning of the year, I wasn't getting a lot of ice time, and it was the first moment where I thought, okay, maybe I might not be doing this, but I picked it up, like I said, at the end of that year, and hey, I don't know if there are very many hockey players in the world that you'll talk to that won't say that, oh yeah, I could have made it. And I'm one of those guys. Like, I actually, the skate that I went to this morning, it was all Division I players, got a couple guys that are currently playing D1 and a couple guys that played pro. And I'm the only guy out there that didn't play college hockey. And I mean, it definitely reminds you that these guys are really, really good. But just the fact that I'm out there and mixing it up and just for fun, still hanging with those guys, I personally, my pride and my ego tells me, oh, I still could do it. But yeah, no, I mean, could I have played in Europe, or could I have played in the minor leagues or whatever? I would like to think so. But it was kind of, towards the middle of my senior year, I was starting to actually get a lot of college interest, which was awesome. That was such a fun experience. And anybody that is a skier, even, go to those recruitment weekends and go hang out with the team. And we already talked about that, and how the team for me is a big thing. So, I might be biased, but going to Collegiate Nationals this year and hanging out with the team, like, I don't think people really understand how important that was for me. And I tried to tell the team there, but, we just came off the World, so most people were like, oh, yeah, whatever, Collegiate Nationals, have fun. But I was so nervous because of how important it was. And And like I said, you know, if you get those college opportunities to go and to tour the school and to hang out and to kind of get pampered a little bit, like it's always nice to have somebody say that they want you. I'll go for it. Like go enjoy that time. And so for me, I was starting to get college interest and had coaches come out to the games, and the one school that stood out for me above all was Yale. I wanted to go play hockey at Yale. I don't know exactly why. Obviously Ivy League. I think I like the color blue, so maybe that was why. But the coach came and there was a lot of interest. In the first game he came, we played well, we won. And the second game, here's another thing that all hockey players do that have played at a high level. They'll talk about all the guys that they played against. So I played against a team that has a guy that plays in the NHL now. So every time I see him, I point him out. I'm like, that guy, that's the guy. And so we played against them and we lost 8-1. And I didn't feel like I played that bad, but we lost 8-1. And that in and of itself was not great. And that was it. That was the last time the coach ever came to watch me play. And that, first of all, shows you how hard it is to make it as a hockey player or any high level sport like that. Obviously it's hard. But that was for me, that was kind of a bit of a tough moment, because that's, I think, where it set in that for some reason that was it. Like that was the dream. And now I kind of think I'm going to play or ski instead. You know, I wasn't fully committed to which way I wanted to go until I actually sent in my college deposit when I decided to go to Rollins. But yeah, I don't know. It just that was the moment. For some reason, I knew deep down that I wanted to go back and I wanted to ski, and I just was gonna be happier as a whole. I would get really upset with myself, obviously, also after skiing. My dad would say that, but every hockey game, there's always something that I could have done, something I could have done better. Even if I scored a goal, it was, you know, I could have done this, I could have done that. So the sports psychology that I did when I was younger, I think was actually more important for my hockey. And I think my mentality was the biggest thing that held me back when I was playing hockey. And it was something that I benefited from in skiing later by working on all that. But yeah, I was always, you know, I was hard on myself and worried about letting the other guys on the team down, which again, like the team aspect for me is so important, being able to rely on people. And then in the end, the injury that I had, I think it was, you know, late April, early May of that year. I was just getting out of school, or just finishing school up in Boston. I was supposed to go to Rollins the next year and ski full time for the first time. So I was excited. And then I went down to McCormick's, and I tried to start jumping 200 feet in 2 days. And I think I was 18 at the time, just going up in speed. So it was a lot of things that I shouldn't have pushed that hard. Like, you know, when you lose respect for jumping or any aspect of skiing, once you lose that respect for how dangerous it really is, that's when things can definitely go wrong. And I thought I was indestructible at the time, and, you know, ended up clipping the corner and came off, and it ripped my one ski back, and it tore my PCL and my MCL. And, you know, not that it was lucky that I chose skiing and then got hurt, but it was definitely better than having played hockey and gotten hurt right after, because I don't know, that injury, I don't know if I could have made it back. The progression that everybody was on, I don't know if I could have made it back for hockey. So it would have actually ended my hockey career probably if I had that. Granted, I might not have been skiing if I had chosen hockey, but so yeah, then that whole process obviously was tough too, because I had just finished hockey, and I didn't play hockey for probably 3.5 years after that. So it was a mixture of, you know, missing the game and not wanting it to end, and then being upset when it ended, and then being hurt and being so worried about coming back for skiing again. And, you know, I just talked about how going to Boston fueled that fire for my passion. I think the injury to my knee really, again, showed me how much I love skiing, because that was the only thing on my mind for 9 months was, I need to get back. I need to get back on the water, and I want to be better than ever, and I want to come back and, you know, get all these goals and accomplishments that my parents have and the ones that I've been setting since I was a kid. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, so like what I hear is a lot of like things that contributed. And in fairness, it seemed to me that, like, as opposed to maybe some of the similar decisions that your mom made in her journey, you had you had, again, one foot in the binding, one foot in the skates.
Yeah.
So for you, it wasn't that, I guess, okay, I realized this is the end. What do I do next? Like you knew what was next if you had gone one way or the other.
Yeah.
Just one question before we go to post high school and into college. So you obviously skied junior masters, junior worlds, those type of big events as a junior, and you were skiing for Austria at the time.
Yep.
Now, more than the worlds, I'm interested, and I mean, there should be a lot about worlds also, because your dad was part of the first junior worlds ever done. I mean, there's a whole side there, but I'm more interested about masters, simply because of what you said about, you know, the story of you jumping in water with dad and masters being part of what you saw since you were a little kid. How did you leave those junior masters, especially given that you were playing hockey at the time? Like, you had this whole thing going on.
Yeah, it's actually, it's good that we're not talking about the junior worlds, because surprisingly, I never went to a junior worlds, not one. And yeah, and that was partially because of school, just timing wise. And yeah, and I never, it's crazy. I went to one under 21 worlds when I was 17, and I had the speed still down, and I wasn't really, like, it wasn't about winning. And then I only went to one at the end when I was 21 in Ukraine, and I didn't win, and I was the favorite to win overall, and I didn't win. And so, it's kind of funny. I've always had this goal to be world champion, and I never went to a junior worlds. I never won an under 21 worlds. And then this is my first world title this year.
This year?
Yeah.
No way.
So,
No way.
I guess if I were trying to give a little message to a bunch of people out there, don't ever stop trying to keep going for that goal that you want. Like, I as much as I wanted to win a junior worlds, I had other goals as well, and with hockey and stuff, and never went, and it didn't bother me. I always figured open worlds is the one I want to win, and then went to the under 21 worlds and thought, I do want to win this, obviously. And then didn't get it. But at the same time, I just kind of kept putting my head down, kept moving. And, I figured I shouldn't say I knew, because we can get into that as well. But, I always knew that I was going to fight to get a world title. So yeah, kind of interesting side note that I never went to a junior worlds. What was the question?
Yeah, junior masters.
Junior masters.
Because you did say you won junior masters more than once. You sound like you went to a few of those, and I like the premise of you going as a little kid with dad, and now skiing those tournaments, scrambling preparation after high school or during high school. What do you recall? Because like, this is my personal experience, but I got to see it with our guest. When you go to masters for the first time as a skier, even as a junior skier, you are sort of like overwhelmed by the greatness, right? But you, because of your upbringing, you already seen it.
Yeah.
So what was it for you to ski in it?
Yeah. Junior masters, awesome, so much fun. And it's super challenging, and everybody same thing with Moomba. Like, you get there and everybody's like, yep, be ready. Like, it's going to be hard.
It's hard.
And you always like, yeah, I got this. No worries. No problem. I actually, like, Moomba, I went out at 32 my first year, and I regretted that decision.
Right.
Anyway, yeah. So I went out first year junior masters. I actually was nuts. So the year before, I wanted to qualify when I was 14, and I had the scores at LCQ to qualify for overall, but that was the one year where they decided that they weren't going to have juniors qualify. So I didn't get to go. And that was the year that my dad, I think, was coming back from injury. It was 2011. And he had just hurt his knee at the Masters before. And then him and Scott qualified at LCQ. My dad went 228. Scott went 226. And
I remember that year.
Yeah. That was a cool LCQ. And so then I went and I watched. I was skiing with Santi and Alejo Robledo. Janina was here, and Camille from France was here. So we had a big group, and had a lot of fun. But I was the guy that didn't ski, and that it annoyed me. And
right.
And then the next year, I was second overall behind Josh Bryan on the world ranking list, and I hadn't skied that many tournaments because at that point I was at school in Boston, And at the end of the year, Ronnie called my dad and she said, "Oh man, like that's too bad that Dorien didn't qualify. He's fourth." And we're like, "What do you mean? Like I'm second." And it turns out that some signature on a piece of paper, the homologator, like it was the wrong person or whatever. So they threw out the ratings for that tournament. And it was one of the only tournaments I'd skied. So I dropped down and I ended up rushing from school to LCQ that year, then qualified at LCQ. So then I had to go out first off the dock and everything at the Masters, which honestly probably was a good thing for my first year. Like just get out, get it done. And it was interesting for a guy that considers himself really competitive. I wasn't super uptight about how I was going to ski. I think having seen how everybody, or how like the pros handled themselves around the Masters and having been there, I think that prepared me really well in a sense that I was going to enjoy it and I was going to go out and just ski the way that, you know, I could that day. And that's probably the biggest piece of advice I've always carried from my mom. Is she says it so many times, and at times I roll my eyes because she says it all the time. But she always said, you know, you can only ski as good as you can ski, which is maddening at times because sometimes as good as we can ski isn't enough on that day. But you know, I always look at it as that's not the point. Like pushing yourself to be as good as you can be, or to maybe be a little bit better than you even thought possible on that day, that's what really matters. Like that's the whole point of competing. Actually, you know, a little side note, I was in a class at Rollins. I guess this is one of the beauties of liberal arts. I had to take a health and wellness class to graduate. And the teacher, this is the thing that stuck with me the most about that class, is the teacher said that the word compete comes from the Latin words cum and pete. And so it's striving or struggling together, which striving actually sounds better. So let's just go with that.
Right.
But so the literal definition of compete is for a bunch of people to come together and to push themselves to all be better. So, you know, when you look at competing in that sense, it completely changes the word, or completely changes the vibe of why we do this. We're not doing this to, you know, obviously medals and world titles are really important. I'm definitely not going to say that they're not, because, you know, I've stressed so long about winning a world title and breaking the world record. And people can tell you how much the last year has meant to me. But yeah, so, you know, I went out at the Masters and I just kind of enjoyed it and had fun that day. And I was young, so I wasn't too stressed. I just kind of wanted to take it to everybody. And I think that year I made the finals in trick and didn't jump particularly amazing. And I don't actually, it's surprising. I don't remember how I slalomed, but I know I finished third in overall behind Santi and Josh. And I finished second in tricks behind Josh and in front of Santi. And, you know, Santi and I grew up together skiing, and he's hilarious. Actually, he'd be a really funny person to interview because he's had such
Santi was good, man.
Yeah, really good.
Was really good.
Really good. And,
you know?
and watching him here, he had so much talent. It was so fun. And when he was here, those couple years that I just talked about was the years where he started growing out the dreads. So it was an interesting time, like a lot of growing as a whole for us as kids, and him growing the dreads and us just growing up together. It was fun. But yeah,
finding identity.
Yeah. And so that was my first Masters. And then the next one after, I came back and I was already qualified and still trained really hard coming back in. And I always took a couple weeks off of school, or 1 week off of school, to come down to train and go to LCQ. And that year I definitely put more pressure on myself to, like, okay, I want to do well. And yeah, that second year went really, really well. I made the finals in all 3 events. I ended up skiing 6 times on that one day, which, you know, it's kind of the awesome thing about Junior Masters. You get it done on that Friday, and then you get to hang out with the group. And, you know, always kind of comes back to this group thing. Like we go over to when they had the slides and all the stuff on the other side, and just, you know, hang out and enjoy being competitors together. But yeah, that year,
I saw that again this year. I brought Florian, one of the juniors, that skis with me. and just being able to observe it years later, just letting him loose, obviously with a side view on him, like it's just so much fun, you know,
yeah.
like the competition, the level is raised on the Friday, and then Friday evening, Saturday, Sunday, you get to be sort of like enchanted by the level of skiing around you and meet new friends. You know?
No, I mean, hey, I don't want to, I don't want to give any bad ideas to kids listening out there, because I mean, we had some fun. Hey, and it was all legal fun, by the way, just to point it out.
Of course.
But like, I mean, okay, like jumping off the pavilion, stuff like that, like stuff we weren't supposed to do. Yeah, I mean, like things like that, you know, just memories that I have of the Masters. Like, obviously, I remember skiing at the Masters, and like I said, that second year, I won jump, I won overall, I finished second in slalom, and third in tricks. So like, I couldn't have had a better tournament, really. And yet the things that I remember more are the times off the water, like jumping off the pavilion, and then the security guard coming down and searching for us, and we were floating underneath the dock trying to hide, and going over to the iceberg when that was a thing over on the other side, and it was this big floating iceberg you climbed up, and somehow I don't know how, but somehow it got broken at the end of that weekend, and I don't know. Anyway,
who knows? Who knows how it happened?
These things happen.
Who knows how it happened?
Anyway, yeah. So that second year was awesome, and then the third year followed it up really well as well. One jump again, one overall again. Finished third in slalom in one of the coolest slalom events that I've been a part of. It was the year that Brando won, and Eamon Vandermeer came in second. He's a kid from South Africa, and the three of us had kind of grown up skiing against each other at all the Europeans. And another side note, Europeans, I'm sorry, I know I'm Canadian and Pan Ams and everything, but like, man, Europeans is the most fun events. I mean, it's like Europeans, Collegiate Nationals, Junior Masters, like those are, and Moomba, those are, oh my God, above. But yeah.
Speaking of Masters, Europeans, Juniors, your last year you won jump, and I just want to hear your take on this, because I was there. Who was I there with? Robert, maybe. I was there. I brought some junior there as a coach. And I remember you jumped 56.5 to take the win. But after you, Felix went. And I remember he had this humongous, monstrous jump that he didn't land. Basically, he landed and then he sort of fell. I'm just curious, just a snippet, what were you thinking when you saw him take off? Because I remember the whole place went bizarre.
Yeah. That was my second year. And
was it your second year?
Yeah, it was my second year. And I remember that pretty clearly. I remember like very clearly not watching as he hit the jump, but I heard the crowd off the top, and I immediately turned around, and you know, as much as I wanted to do well, obviously I was up in school, and you know, once you ski, and once you, like my mom said, once you do as well as you can do that day, you can't really be upset with other people beating you. I mean, yes, you can. You physically can be upset. I mean, trust me, I was mad. I was mad at the Worlds when I didn't win overall and everything. But yeah, I remember him coming off the top, and I was like, oh, here we go. And then he didn't land the jump, and it wasn't his last jump, so he still had another chance. And anybody can tell you that watching is the worst part. It's the most fun when you win after, but it's all, well, no, actually I take that back. Being on the water and winning is probably more fun. But it's so nerve-wracking, and he went out and he fell, and then Taylor was still last, and Taylor was favored to win. And I remember Taylor's first two jumps were okay, and then his third jump, I don't know. I'm always that guy that's a little bit cautious, which is funny because I do want to say, like, you know, throwing the fist. I know there's a lot of people out there that say don't throw the fist. It's like, act like you've been there before. I am somewhat completely against that mentality. But I remember Taylor landed his last jump, and I was standing there, and Corbin Geyer was there with me. I think he skied at that Masters, and he was yelling like, dude, you got it. And I was like, no. Like, I'm waiting for that score to come up. And then, yeah, once the score came up, they pushed me in the water, and we were all going nuts. But yeah, it was crazy. And Felix, I mean, man, he's had some tough couple goes these last couple years, and I feel for him because, man, he was so good as a junior. Like, another guy that was unreal. I mean, like him, and when Timmy was obviously older than all of us, and Timmy was still like the guy for junior jumping.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how anybody will ever be like that. I mean, Pole was pretty unbelievable. Taylor also, obviously, and a couple other guys, but Timmy was great. And then Felix was coming up, and it was just like, dude, this guy is going to be so good. And then he did that at the Masters, and it was one of his earlier years. And then, yeah, just recently, obviously the injuries, and it's just so tough to watch that because you know how talented he is. And, you know, I wish him all the best. Having gone through an injury myself, would never want somebody to go through that. But yeah,
you know the challenges.
Yeah. But I think, you know, as much as that was tough for him falling on that jump, you know, it is what it is. I mean, it's the same thing as the Worlds this year, you know. Did I have the biggest trick run? I mean, I went for my big run. I didn't get all my tricks in. I lost ski line back to back at the end, and at the end of the day, like, did everybody fall? Yes. And is that, you know, does that take away from it? No, not at all. Like, you still got to go out and do it. And falling on a landing has happened before. It'll happen again, and you hate to see it, but you know, at the end of the day, it worked out for me. So yeah.
No, of course. I was just curious because I remember those 3 or 4 seconds, basically the time that it took from him leaving the ramp to the crowd go, what?
Yeah.
And then as he couldn't land, it went like, no, you know, but I was curious to hear the story from the guy who won.
Yeah,
you know?
no, and we're all, I mean, obviously we're super competitive, all of us, and Felix and I are good friends. I really enjoy hanging out with him. And I remember at the banquet after, we had all the juniors were at one table, and I got up for I think it was the Rocket Man Award. And he said something like, just a little dig, like, oh, that should have been me, in like a funny way. Like, I don't want people to listen to that and say, oh, like, that's a kind of a jerk thing to say. Like, he said it in a funny way, and I just kind of looked at him and gave him like the not that I knew it at the time, but like almost like the Jordan shrug, like, well, that's what it is.
Right.
And we kind of laughed about it. I don't know, he might have been a little upset still, but you know, that, yeah, I know there's stories of, like, I think, I don't know if I want to get this wrong, but I think Jimmy Clooney or someone, my dad said, broke the world record and got up and threw the fist so hard that they actually fell backwards on the fist pump. So like, it's happened. It happens. So
jumpers, man.
And I mean, the Masters is rolly as it is anyway. So, you know, things happen. Yeah, it's tough.
Hey, look, Dorien, how about we take a little break, and when we come back, we're gonna go through the U21 years and into more recent stuff.
Cool. Sounds good.